right. Good morning, everyone. How are you doing?
Good.
I said that before, didn't I? Okay. You know, a couple of things I want to mention. First of all, yeah, I don't know if you recall, but in the shop we had an old set of tools with plastic, of chisels with plastic handles. We've replaced those with a nice set of Stanley Sweethearts that were in our chisel box there, and they're really nice, and it looks to me as if they've been used. But anyway, just for you guys to be aware, they're socket chisels, so we'll have to bang the handles in every now and again. But they are really nice chisels. And now I'm gonna just move on to today's topic, really, which is wet sharpening. We have here the Cormac one that we have in the, and it's an older unit, but it works just fine. It's known, the wet sharpening system is, if you use it right, it's really pretty easy and works very well. I like to use it in conjunction with other blade sharpening methods as well. I use one of these to do the heavy work and then get it sharp. But you can actually create a plain blade that is sharp without having to put it onto any kind of a stone. This thing will cut human hair, and I did it on my one at home. But anyway, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the different kinds of bevels that we have and how a wet sharpening system works, or any wheel sharpening system, whether it's dry or even the old-fashioned whetstones that were used for sharpening axes and so on. When I was a kid, you'd see them around on farms and stuff. But anyway, the blades that we use in woodwork, what they require is a really, really fine, sharp edge in order to cut the fibers of the wood in a really clean way, shall we say. Not all blades need to be like that. So I'm going to go over a couple of different shapes of blades. When you buy, say, a new Lee-Nielsen, it comes with the bevel here, absolutely perfectly straight. And all you have to do in order to sharpen it, or actually polish it, is basically make sure you have enough pressure to keep this surface on your stone, go back and forth, polish it, polish the back a little bit, and you're ready to go. You also can use a hollow grind, which is what we're going to address today. What it is it's been sharpened on a wheel, and it has a very slight concavity to it. So what it does is it actually creates the sharp edge here, or the leading edge, as it were. And there is a little bit of a price to pay in terms of weakness at this edge, especially if you're cutting like a 17-degree angle or something that's really shallow. So be aware of that, but the answer to that is just to, if you're doing the heavy work, do the hollow grind and then finish it up by hand. And then there's the convex blade. You will often see this on things that you buy at the swap meet. What it is that over time, a person has sharpened the bevel into a convex shape, which is okay for some things. For example, if you need to use a hunting knife, you actually want it to have a convex edge there. I don't know if you can see that, but it's not hollow, it's not flat, it's actually convex, because you're going to be, you know, a hunting knife, you're going to be cutting things that are hard and tissue and so on. So this is good for that. It has a bit more durability, but it's no use for woodwork.
Paul, I've attended many of your videos, and that was the most threatening 5 seconds that I've ever experienced with you.
Well, I hope that's the most threatening 5 seconds you ever get from me. Yeah, as you can see, it's clean, sharp, and completely unused, because in my world, killing things is not something I take pleasure in. So I actually inherited it. But I do like a sharp blade for woodwork. I really like a sharp blade for woodwork and won't settle for anything less. So we go, I use a combination of the flat and the hollow. I was taught in hand tool joinery how to sharpen a hollow grind blade, and it really is easy compared to even a flat blade. Anyway, basically what's happening is that we have a wheel rotating, and we put our blade up against that wheel at the angle. We set the angle that we want the bevel to be, and we put that up against the wheel, and we grind it until it has the hollow grind, curved grind there. And then we work it up to a real nice sharp edge. Now, obviously, we need to set this thing up in two ways. We need to set up the angle that is appropriate for us to cut here on the wheel. And we also, in looking at the blade, I'm not going to take that out, but I can take it off. I've already put permanent marker on this because we're going to use that as a tool, but this is a fairly wide blade, and we need to be cutting it somewhere. If I cut it back here, it's going to take too long and eat up a lot of metal. If I start cutting too far to the front, then it's going to not eat up enough metal and not make the full bevel, which actually doesn't matter that much, but it looks better if you've got the full bevel. So what we're doing is we're wanting to basically hit in the middle of the bevel there. If we hit down here, as I mentioned just now, what happens is that we start cutting down here, and we end up having to, in order to get a sharp edge here, we end up taking out a huge amount of metal there. If we start up here and do that, what happens is that we take out a huge amount of metal here to get back to our beveled edge. So we really want to hit it. It's a judgment call. So I usually go for, unless there's a particular reason, usually go for hitting it right in the middle. So let's move straight to the wheel.
Hey, Paul.
And can you set this up a little closer to the wheel while I talk about it?
There's a question coming.
Yeah,
Yes.
Paul, based on your description, it sounds as though if you do nothing else, if you hit the center of your beveled edge on the wheel, you're going to get that concave shape. Is that basically what we're going to see here?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, indeed. Oh, I didn't realize he's holding a camera up here. Absolutely, yes. So we're going to shoot for that, and depending on the time, I hope we'll get to setting this up just right.
Point out the Sharpie under.
Sorry?
The Sharpie under.
Yes, that's Sharpie on there. Well, yes, it is. So yes, I'm going to shoot for getting it in the middle. I'm going to show you guys how to do that. All right, going back to the machine. What's the best angle for that? Do you want to?
I'm going to be right here.
It's probably going to be here for a while if you have any way to hold it. But okay, so this is basically it's a Swedish machine. It's very, very simple. The wheel for sharpening, as I mentioned, is has been around for hundreds and hundreds of years, if not thousands. Just a piece of stone that circulates, and you can wind it by hand, or you can run it with an electric motor. And that's what we have here. It's a big, heavy wheel. It runs in water, and I'm going to have to top it off a little bit. When you start out with a Tormek wheel, if it's been dry, it's going to take 2 to 3 pints of water. You fill up the reservoir, which I'm not going to move because it always spills, but there's a black plastic reservoir down here that holds the water, and it has a way to position it away from the wheel, because you don't want to leave the wheel in the water for any longer than you're using it. It can damage the wheel if you leave it overnight or for a couple of days. So you want to make sure there's enough water in here. And then basically this is set up 2 ways. You can either grind using this mount here. You can grind towards the blade, right, which gives you the ability to put more pressure on it and to give it a harder grind. And that's for the heavy stuff. And then this wheel can be converted from, it's currently set at 220 grit, but you can get it up to the fine grit of 1,000 fairly easily. And I'll be demonstrating that. And you can also flatten the back. This is something I just discovered a couple of weeks ago. You can flatten the back, and it actually works pretty well. I will do that in a little bit. Anyway, so it circulates in this water here. These wheels over here are honing wheels. These are the ones that you actually achieve the sharpness with. This is a nice little one that's good for carving tools. And just to give you a contrast, this is Swedish. I think they must have come up with this around about 20, 25 years ago, or maybe longer. It's expensive, shall we say. It's $600–700, I think, for the basic unit. And then their accessories are fairly expensive, but to be honest, worth it. You know, I think the quality of their accessory products is worth it. But in order, if you want to just buy a cheap wheel with a honing wheel, and you don't want to spend a huge amount of money, that will do pretty much the same thing. You see the brand name here. Rikon also made one. I bought this, I think it was $135, and they were doing free shipping at the time. And this is what I use at home. This is what I sharpened this blade from scratch with. I did polish the back here a little bit, just on a very fine back, but I did most of the heavy work on this wheel. It has the same thing where you can move the, oh, sorry, I'll put that down. You can move the grinding bar back to where it's going away from you as well. And that gives you that finer control over your edge and so on. But anyway, it's actually quite a versatile machine. It can do, I'll step back over here. But
The tall question.
Yes.
Will the Tormac accessories fit on this? Or
Oh, thank you for asking. Absolutely. That's a Tormac accessory. The one I've got over here that I'm going to demo with you, I would need to switch it around in order to use it in its current position. But, oh, no, I wouldn't.
Hey, Paul, you said it was a Rikon, but it says Grizzly on it.
They said that Rikon and Grizzly make them knockoff. He's got the Grizzly.
I got it. Okay.
Rockler, I just noticed a Rockler ad that Rikon is selling one for about $139. So, you know, and to be honest, I'm hard put to tell the difference, except, you know, this is pressed steel, that is cast some kind of nice, you know. But as I say, I mean, for example, you need to true the wheels fairly often because they are soft. One reason it's nice as a wet grind is, well, the major reason it works really well for woodworking blades is it doesn't heat the blade up in any way. It keeps that blade absolutely as cool as the water that you're running it through. No sparks, so it reduces, you know, you could use this outdoor without any fire danger, whereas I wouldn't care to use my slow speed grinder. It runs at 120 revolutions per minute. It has the sort of safety advantage that working slower, if something goes wrong, it's less likely to mangle your hands. You still have to be careful, but the injuries that you get tend to be knuckles that touch the wheel and stuff like that. So it's relatively, if you're careful, you don't get injuries. This is another accessory that Grizzly sells. It's one where you can just set the angle of this and then place a blade on there. They also make a knife sharpening. This is shop property. So you guys, if you have knives you want to sharpen, this is the knife sharpening device. It works basically like that. You would need to take your raise it up and so on, but that works really nicely. You remember I showed you a homemade Spokeshave Sharpening device for using on a stone? You can use the same device on a wheel as well. You can make your own range of of purpose-made equipment. You can use it for skew blades. I'll just show you this before we go back to the Tormek. This is one of the things you get that's a bit nicer with the Tormek. When you get your Grizzly, it has settings for blades at 30, 40, 35 degrees, knives, plain blades, all that sort of thing. And I'll show you how it works much the same way as that does, but without any adjustability. So it's not quite as adjustable. You can adjust it, for example, to 22.5 degrees, which you can with the Tormek. But to all practical intents and purposes, it's very similar machine, and you know, it's a lot less painful to buy for 135 bucks. So going back to the Tormek, okay. So I'm going to run you briefly. Feel free to come back with questions in the future or now. I've already set this one up yesterday, but basically what you do in order to really set the Tormek up as nicely as you can, you measure the diameter of the wheel. So long as you measure across the wheel going through the center bolt. This one I measured yesterday at 9 5/8. So then,
what's in inches?
Yes,
oh.
It's both metric and in inches. It only gives you 1/4 inches in here. So I set this at slightly above 9.5 and slightly under 9 3/4. So you set that there, and then you set the angle that you want to grind at, which I had already tested this by looking at, I don't know if you can see, but along here are a bunch of angle slots.
Hold it real still.
How's that? You see this one is at 22.5, but there are 25 and 30 and 35 and 40. So you can, if you get a rough old blade like this, you can measure the blade, the angle that it's at, and then cut to that same angle, or you can change it to a different angle as you choose.
Hey, Paul, let me just see if I got that straight. That little gizmo you had 3 purposes. The first was to just guesstimate based on the slots what the current chisel angle might be.
Yes.
And then you'd go ahead and decide if you wanted to change that, but you'd adjust that on the right dial, and the left dial was the diameter of the wheel at this given moment, right?
Yes.
Okay, and that's going to give us how we'll use it in just a second. Okay, good. Thanks.
Yes. So once I've set this piece, I put this up here. Nice thing about having this particular piece, and I think I might buy one of these, is that I can transfer, when I transfer to the fine cut and bring it over here, I can reset the wheel to exactly the same setting. So I'm not then grinding myself a second hologram, which I did on that one there. In practical purpose, in practical use, it doesn't matter, but you know, I like things to be just right. So what we do is we take this and we take that, we place the piece where we set the blade height there, and then we adjust. In this case, it's gone slightly out of adjustment, so I'm going to adjust it. There are 2 ways to adjust it. I can move the plain blade back and forth, or I can move this up and down. I find that moving this up and down is better, and the more modern ones actually have a micro adjust. So what I do is I adjust it until I can't see any light through it, just like looking for square or whatever. And
if you back away just a little bit, there'll be light behind, they can see that.
Yeah, no kidding. That's really good, Dallas. We can see exactly the gap there. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's quite a gap there. So I'm going to adjust again. And this is fiddly when you've got this in place and you're just doing it one-handed. But you see, I increased the gap there, I think. So that's pretty good. I'm stuck. Oh, yes. For the sake of Okay, I'm going to get over here, which makes my life so much.
Perfect.
Okay. That's pretty darn close. Remember that it's not so critical the exact angle as the general area. You know, it really doesn't matter if your angle is 22.5 degrees or 22 degrees. Thank you.
I have one of these, and mine's a newer model, and they give you a thumb screw on the side on the height thing, so you can just make real fine adjustments up and down. You get it very precise.
Yeah, yeah. And so that is a really nice feature of the Tormek, and for some that might be worth the money. But I'm going to guess, I haven't checked, I'm going to guess this piece is probably minimum $40 to $50.
Oh, wow.
Possibly 70. But look around, because other people, I bought a set of accessories with this one that I think it brought my grand total to 200 or close to. And I bought the accessory, everything that I've needed so far. The only thing I really want is a skew accessory. But anyway, so.
Well, would
yes.
you use this for non-flat blades as well, like for gouges? Would you use this on?
Yes, absolutely. This is the gouge. This is for straight gouges. Now, if you have a curved gouge,
yeah,
then there's another device that you can get that kind of sets it up. You know, you've got several adjustments in it, and you set it up just right, and all you have to do is roll your gouge around.
So it gives you an additional axis of rotation. Okay, okay.
Yes, basically, for a straight gouge, you fit your gouge in here.
Yeah.
And then put it on here, and you use the back of the gouge as your rolling point, and that gives you the shape.
Is that true on your Rikon as well?
Sorry?
Is it true on the Grizzly?
My Grizzly one is, I don't think I have the adapter with it. It's a much bigger, chunkier thing, but it's true exactly the same thing on there.
Okay.
It does make it easy. What I personally have found is, having spent so much of my life sharpening things by hand, I take the gouge, and it's a constant interaction between my hands and my eyes and the gouge, but I grind the gouge. I thought I had one with me, but I grind the gouge so that the back is not hollow, but sharpenable, so it's close to flat, you know.
Great.
And
Thank
then
you.
as you sharpen it, it goes flat.
Thank you.
All right, so yes, they have knife sharpening. You can even sharpen your planer blades. If you have sharpenable planer blades, we don't have the adapter, but you could buy the adapter and come in and use our Tormek. The other thing that is worth buying with the Tormek is the device for truing it. It's a little diamond device, and
You almost have to have that.
huh?
You almost have to have that.
You pretty much have to have that, because you know, unless you're only doing gouges and so on. But the moment someone starts grinding gouges on these things, unless they're very, very careful, you go out of, you know, you get all kinds of grooves and stuff. So we'll talk about keeping the flatness when using, when cutting a plane blade. So anyway, how are we doing on time? Because I don't want to run beyond an hour on it. No, we'll do.
There's a clock up here, Paul.
Sorry? Oh, great, cool. Okay, so yes, again and again, you can use the homemade devices on these as well. Okay, so now we've got our angle set up. The other thing that I do, and again, this gets you out of having to use one of these, but it's a pain in the rear end when you actually want to transfer from the coarse to the fine and switch these pieces over. But I just eyeball it. So even after setting it up, I look through there, and I'm looking at that, and I can see that. I'll show you. So I've eyeballed it, and I can see that I'm going to be cutting fairly close to the front end of the blade there, because there was a gap at the back there. So the way to do that without even having it switched on, that's getting awful close to, that'll be fine. So
I got a question.
Question
Yes.
here.
How do you even know that you are working with a good angle on that blade, or if it was ground incorrectly?
Excellent question. Excellent question. And thank you for reminding me, because that is something. You check it. It's challenging with these old blades because, for example, this one has about a 2 millimeter difference between the front and the back end in terms of that. It's also tapered that way, but it's got a slight difference there. So what I do with these old blades, usually new blade, you check it for square. You just quite simply, if you're sharpening it, you take an engineer's square and you bring it down and you look at the gap on the blade. And then you have a couple of options. If you're using a Tormek, then it becomes a little easier. And what I do is I take the square, and I've done it on this one. I take the square and I mark permanent marker above it. I take it back to where I can see metal all the way, and then I mark permanent marker above it. Now, when you're doing it with the wheel coming towards you, the friction alone seems to take the marker off. But you can always mark the back end as well for square, or keep checking it. But basically, I had to choose on this one which side I was going to use as my square. But when you fit it in here, the right-hand end, as it were, your left-hand end, goes square up against here. But I always check it. And something else I do is I put once I've got it set, I put a permanent marker line across there so that if I have to, for any reason, take this out, I can bring it exactly back to that line. And that's just experience to show me that those times I've loosened this up, forgotten that I need to keep it steady, and then remember, oh, sugar.
Hey, Dallas?
Yes.
Just because
Hold on one second.
just because you have the micro adjust on the vertical bar, do you tend to use that for adjusting the height or the angle of the bevel on the wheel? Because once you've got the chisel, for instance, in that jig, you wouldn't want to mess with it being thrown out of perpendicular. You'd really want to keep it locked in. So
Exactly.
Absolutely right, yeah.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I will keep this in this as far as I possibly can.
And even with this one, without the micro adjust, I wouldn't mess with it in the jig.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay, good. Thanks.
Yeah. But yes, no, that micro, once you get these things set up, it's a bit like we're all old enough to remember tuning up the engines on our car or paying someone to do it. And, by the time you've got that, the plug gaps and the contact breaker gap and everything set up, you don't want to mess with it. So it's much like this. So.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Oh, that's not a really good analogy, but yeah, basically set it up. Just like when you remember when I talked about using the Veritas hand jig, I said, take it all the way before you take it out. Be done with using that jig before you take it out. Okay, so moving on. I've got everything set up. I know there's a gap. So what we do next is I'll rotate the wheel just to get a little water on it. And then, without turning it on, I'm just going to turn the wheel. In setting this, going back to that question about the blade, in setting this square here, if this wheel is square and flat, I will eventually grind down to that line that I've got there. So what we're going to see on this one, if I've set it right, is that I'm going to get more of a grind here and less of a grind over here, and it'll be near the front end. And sure enough, even with just a hand rotation, I've got a little bit of steel showing on that front, your left-hand edge. So I'm going to just do it a little bit more to clarify things. And actually, if I push it towards me, it's harder work.
Hey, Paul, I know you're doing it this way. The way I've always done this is just move it back and forth.
Oh, we will be, yes. But I'm just doing this by hand. Oh, I see. Oh.
Yeah.
This is the way I'm teaching you is the Tormek way, and that's the wise way. Move it back and forth. And you will see it's beginning to grind towards the front end of that blade. So I think I want to adjust that. And this is where I have to think. I want to take it up just a tiny, tiny bit.
Take it up or take it down?
Take it down. This is like using a router, isn't it?
You guys make a good team.
There we go. Now what I can see there is I can see a gap at either end, either side of the blade.
Does that show up at all?
I don't have a lot.
Doesn't show real well.
Which probably means you if you can't see the gap and all you can see is a black line, we're there.
Pretty good, yeah.
So let's use. Thank you, Dallas. That is even easier. And again, the beauty of this is you can just slide it off.
Yeah, let's show them what that looks like.
Yes, I will. Yes. See, I'm closer to the middle there.
Oh yeah.
So, you know, I'm not going to make fractions of a millimeter adjustment. We'll go with that. Okay, so when he started talking about taking the blade from side to side, I immediately went to the other action that you do with the blade side to side, which is when you're running this baby, you keep it moving. 2 reasons. You want to wear this evenly. You want to wear the stone evenly, which if you keep it moving, it will do. You don't want to keep the blade in the same place for a long time because there are little variations in the size of the stones here because it's a compound, you know, it's lots of different granules joined together. It's not a natural product. And so you'll end up with grooves in your blade. So you keep that moving. And there's a third thing I wanted to mention about that. But, oh, yes. You've also got to remember, as you move it, you can move out up to half of the blade width away from the wheel. No more, because then you, especially over this end, you might begin to get some movement. But what you need to remember is that during all this time, the middle is getting ground all the time. And so you have to spend a little more time on the edges here as you go through it, which I'm about to do now. So safety glasses, your choice is to, I think it's better without gloves. Usually I wear gloves for hand sharpening because all those bits get in my skin. They tend to get down into this thing. And if you have a magnet a little magnet down in the reservoir here, it'll attract all those iron filings to it. So all you have is the residue from the stone, and you can clean it out a little easier. These pretty much you need to clean them out every time you use it. Okay, so let's go on to actually sharpening the blade. So is everyone pretty clear about how we got to the point where we are and happy that we're proceeding in a logical way?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm gonna wait for everyone to say. All right, here we go. So as this wheel rotates in the water, when you first use it, you keep a careful eye on it because you don't want the wheel. You'll notice the water not being here as well. You know, it'll start to look like this. As soon as it starts to rotate, it'll get nice and glossy. And let's go. All right, so now I'm gonna just gently put the blade on. There's no harm done just doing even that. Except that I want to keep it moving. Let's see what's happened here. Not much yet, but you can see it's beginning to take that corner. Just right in there. So let's put it back on and we'll run it for a minute or two. All right, so this may seem to you sitting here to be taking a while. But believe me, it's a lot quicker than doing all of this by hand. So I'm coming back and forth. When I get out to the edge there, I'm letting it set for a moment. And the speed that you do this at, nobody ever told me what speed to do it at. So I just kind of try to keep a nice smooth motion. I try to remember that I can relax my hands. I don't have to keep a lot of pressure. Just the weight of my hands is enough. This is nice and quiet, no sparks, keeps your blade cool. Okay, let's take a look at this. Now, when you take this off of here with the wheel rotating, you want to be a little careful, especially if the wheel's rotating against you, because what happens is, if I just let this drop, the back end of the tool here will touch the wheel. And if it's the other way, coming the other way, it'll start juddering, and if you happen to have your hand in the wrong place, it might not be very comfortable. But let's take a look. You can see in just a minute or so, as I said, we're grinding a little bit towards the back there, but that's okay. This blade's been around for a while, it can take a little grinding. But it's grinding heavier there and lighter there, and it's grinding heavier where I have the heavy line, the square line there. So you can see it is grinding where I want to. So hopefully by the time we get down to a nice grind on this side, everything will be straight. And that's the point at which we'll stop and maybe make an adjustment. According to Tormek, you can allow yourself 1 or 2 degrees off square with one of these and play with your plane. If it's a bevel up plane, good luck. 1 or 2 degrees is not, you put it 2 degrees out, you're never going to get a good cut in. But you can probably get away with it with a bevel down plane. So this is the point at which you put on a little music and you start moving your body with it and just get into a nice smooth rotation.
But this blade was way out of square to begin with.
Oh, it is way out of square.
So normally you wouldn't have to do this.
No. No, daily, I would always use hand tools. But for someone who wants just one method that will do things, this I guess, will work.
So, Paul, I have a question if I could.
Yes,
So when I've had members come in and use this machine and they are grinding it just like you're showing, and it's going worse out of square as you grind. So how do you adjust for that?
Let me turn this off. Say that again.
Okay, I'm sorry.
That's
So
all right. I just couldn't hear you. My hearing's not-
I've had people bring old swap meet planes in, and they're setting up just like you're demonstrating. But as we grind the plane iron, it gets more out of square the more we grind. So if we're doing that, what are we doing as far as alignment incorrectly?
It's getting you're setting it up. I would suspect you get, it's funny because you do get some odd counterintuitive behaviors sometimes. I've had things where I want to grind here and I set up the square over here and it's grounded, it all looks
opposite of what you thought it was going to?
Sorry?
It was maybe grinding opposite of what you thought it might grind to?
Exactly. And that could very well be a factor of the plane blade not having absolute parallel surfaces.
Okay.
If that happens, what I do, as I say, this one was ever so slightly tapered. So what I'll do is I'll look at it from this side. I will look at it from this side, put the square on both sides. And if I see that it's slightly curved or whatever, I will choose either one side or the other, or even make up the square.
Okay.
And then I'll use that permanent marker, and that for me is critical. And it really doesn't matter if I get the square further back here, because once I start in on that parallel thing, as long as I'm parallel to the back edge, so if I do a big, thick permanent marker mark there, as long as I'm parallel to the back edge, I'm I'm good enough. Or I can clean that off with some alcohol once I've got down there, once I think I'm close to square.
And another question.
That got me a little bit. What you'll find is that almost nothing is true.
Yeah.
Okay.
Unless you bought it from Nick Nielsen.
Hey,
One more quick question, if I could.
Before you go from that one, Doug,
Yeah,
let me just give you a couple things that I've observed.
Yeah, let's.
There's two things that I've seen. One thing is these bushings that are on the inside of these. In fact, if I look at these right now, I can see it get worn, and so you have a little bit of play in them.
Okay.
You have a little play in them, and if you're pushing on one side and then the other, it's going to get off with that. And I
Okay.
can see these bushings need to be replaced on the ones at the shop right now, and that's one thing. There's a little bit of play in there. It'll throw it off a bit. The other thing I find is that some people will. There's a couple of things here. For one thing, they don't tighten down here well enough. They don't keep these good and tight. That's not as common. But the other thing you can do is you can have the adjustment rods. You can have that not square with the wheel.
Oh, okay.
See, and
So
and
how do you verify? That's a great
mine
point.
has thumb screws, so I can adjust it up and down. But if this bar is not parallel with the wheel, then they'll throw you off too.
How do you verify that before you even start? Because if that was off, no matter what you're going to do, is going to be off.
The answer to that is Paul's going to demonstrate.
Okay.
All right.
Great. Great. This is all great stuff.
Well, here's
So
one.
I have the Grizzly, and I have these kind of questions all the time.
Right. Okay. So if you bring the bar down to here,
Bring the bar down to the wheels, what he's saying.
Oh, got it.
and you put a flashlight or something, or a nice bright light here, you can see the parallel. The other thing is, if you use
After you true the wheel,
even if
correct?
Yeah.
say one of these has had a whack and it's ever so slightly out of true, if you use the truing device, as long as this surface and that surface are parallel, you're going to be good. But
Okay.
yeah, there's a few, the Tormac is not a, it's not a plug it in and, it's not like getting a key cut in one of those machines at the supermarket.
Things can go wrong and do, but I can see right now we need new bushings in the one here in this shop. If you can see here, look at how big that bushing is,
Yeah.
Yep.
and then look how thin it is here.
Wow.
Yeah.
Big difference.
Yeah, these are a little less worn, but they're.
Yeah.
So another quick question on the alignment of the plane iron to the jig. Do you take a square and align the plane iron to the jig, make it square before you start? Because if it was skewed even 3 to 5 degrees, that would affect your cut also, right?
Oh, absolutely. So you're saying, do I check once I've put it in the jig?
Right, right. Once you put your plane iron in a jig, before you even start going as far as you have, do you check it to make sure that it's square in the jig?
So what you're saying is, let's imagine this is a square. Do I check that? Absolutely.
Yes, sir. That was my question.
Yes, absolutely. And
Okay.
if I can, and sometimes it takes a little jiggling, I'll check both sides.
Okay.
Because again, in one of these old blades, you sometimes have to make a judgment call on.
Great, great.
Well, that's something I don't do. Maybe I should be, but I really rely very heavily on that marking with the sliding it back and forth across the wheel. And if I can see that that's parallel with the mark I put on the blade, then I know that I'm square.
That's awesome.
Hey, Paul,
Yes.
that horizontal bar is currently mounted in 2 holes on the top of the machine. I noticed that if you go to the back of the machine, there are 2 additional slots
Yes.
to mount that thing horizontal. What were the use cases for mounting it there?
What do you use? What is the reason for having it?
What
It's part of the
types of
process.
sharpening? What types of sharpening would you?
You can hang on. You're going to see in a minute.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, just hang in there. We're going to get there. Okay, so I'm looking at this. Let's grind for another minute or two. I wish it was loud enough to answer questions whilst I'm grinding, and I can put a little pressure on here by 2 ways. I can either put just plain weight there, or I find more comfortable and actually easier to compensate for the bushings is if I put a little pressure from back here. And again, I want to keep it moving. careful with doing 10 to 11. Yeah, I'm not going to get the whole blade cut, but I will. This is one of those Zen moments, you know, you just have to think about your trip to Montana.
Whatever.
You can see it's coming across, and it's going to
very
begin
nice.
fairly soon to start grinding on that front edge. And it's got that angle which looks pretty radical, but we're cutting through the width of it at an angle. So by the time we end up at the, you know, down here, which I think would probably take me 10 minutes or so.
Yeah, maybe not that much.
Maybe that. So maybe not that long, yeah. So I'm going to demonstrate, because I don't want to take this out of the jig, I'm going to demonstrate how you flatten the back, because I did this yesterday. I flattened the back on this wheel, and then I polished it on an 8,000 grit. I gave it a quick
Very nice.
once over with about a 1,200 grit diamond. You can see that this, you know, for a blade that's at least 100 years old, that's a pretty nice piece of steel. It's an old hollow grind there. You can see someone's cut across, and then it's already. I just did this for a moment on the diamond. But anyway, the way the other thing I'm going to have to show you before we move to the fine grit is that this is a device which we'll use in a minute. It's the device that changes it from 220 grit to 1,000 and back again. Doesn't grind much off the wheel, but it does change the grit, which is really nice. So I actually ground one side of this to be coarse and one to be fine. But basically the way, this looks dodgy, but this bar is critical to the safety of this issue. The way you grind your back of your blade is, and remember with a plain blade, the only part that actually needs to be polished is the part that's in front of the chip breaker. So if you take even the polish just a 1/4 inch back, you know, for the actual polish, then it's going to be enough with your chip breaker there. If you're using a chisel, you want to go deeper, but it works really nicely with plain blades. So the key to this is keeping pressure on the outside edge here so that it stays flat against the wheel. But basically,
Dallas, could you read the camera? There, thank you.
Be a bit more careful next
You don't
time.
want to catch that.
Yes.
Is that part of the sharpening process?
That was cool, huh? Okay, so now I've really damaged that blade. So I was gonna have to regrind it anyway. So now I really will. So okay, so be careful. Concentrate on what you're doing and not talking. Again, I'm pivoting this blade. Maybe I should go a little deeper. Pivoting this blade on there. So thank goodness one doesn't have to do this very often. Once in the lifetime of the blade, if that. But you can see it's giving not a perfectly even cut there, but it's grinding across here. And I can then take that, put it on the dial. Once I've spent a few minutes flattening that out.
So you've got this side at 220 and this at 1,000.
I think this one's at 1,000, yeah. I'm going to stand to one side here because I think I can see better. But the real key is keeping a nice, even pressure on this blade. And you really, really want to be careful. But if you get some of these old blades, you'd be astonished how far out of true they are. And they look flat. See, that's given it.
That really doesn't make a big difference.
Yeah. And then I can take this is my 1200. You get some interesting oscillations going when you're doing this on a plastic table. A 1200 diamond plate, which I know is flat. And not much yet, but it's beginning to. Now normally, if I start with the diamond plates here, some of these old plane blades can take me an hour to flatten out. Now I'm not sure whether I'm far enough yet, because I'm kind of hurrying.
I had observed in one of the YouTube things from Kosman that he puts a very slight bevel on the flat side of the blade by indexing off of a hacksaw blade.
I'll tell you a story. When I took hand tool joinery, as Dallas knows, you spend 2 to 3 weeks learning how to sharpen a blade. And I thought, because I sort of learned how to sharpen blades, I thought, okay, on my new hot blade, the standard thing that I've done that makes them work is put a bevel on the back. It's beginning to come up with the polish, but there's work to be done. But it's a lot quicker than doing it the other way.
Yeah.
So she graded, she put out specific requirements for her grading and for testing the sharpness. And I took in this blade that it was working, to me, sweet. And it had a back bevel on it. It had that little ruler trick on it. And she gave me a B. And you know, I said, okay, so what did I do wrong? And she said, look, you've got a blade that is perfectly flat. Why do you need to put a bevel on it for normal use? There's no need to put a little bevel on the back of the blade. What it does is it means that if you want to get rid of that, you now have to grind a lot more metal off of the front end here. If for some crazy reason you were in Nepal and you're working with a blade that you just can't get flat, then one way would be to do the ruler trick. That would give you at least a flat edge to which to sharpen. The other time when it can be useful, and there's an article in 1 or 2 Fine Woodworkers ago by Gary Rogowski. The other time when it can be useful is if you're trying to cut very, very contrary grain. And one of the tips he says is to put a very, very slight back bevel on it, but such a slight back bevel that it's relatively easy to resharpen.
I never put a back bevel on it.
But it's unnecessary, and it gives you one more surface to sharpen.
Okay, thanks for addressing that, yeah.
On the bevel, then that's a different story. So anyways, so this can also be useful for flattening something out. And believe me, this is a heavy duty piece of steel. It's it takes a while to work. You know, these old blades that came from Sheffield, basically they all, you know, the different makers put different stamps on, but they all came from Sheffield, and the steel was all the same, pretty much the same quality. Anyway, I've lost my train of thought there. Fairly easy to polish up, and as I say, once you've done it, then you don't have to do it for the rest of the blade's life, unless you drop it, unless it gets, you know, out of true in some way, shape, or form. But that would be some unfortunate abuse.
Let me address the back bevel for just a second. One of the things with the back bevel you're doing is that if you go back to Paul's example here, a back bevel would give you a little line right here, which makes it less area to sharpen. You can just change that back bevel and give it a little bit of sharpening. But what we're demonstrating here is a hollow grind, and to touch up your blades after you're done, you're just sharpening this edge right here. You're just making this a flat edge across here. So just a couple of strokes on a stone will sharpen that up. Whereas if you have a flat bevel, you have to make this whole piece here true. A back bevel and this will make it touch-ups a little bit easier. This is by far the superior way to do it. And when you have this, you don't even want a back bevel because you're making that point so fine, it's going to break off immediately.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
Great, thanks.
Dallas,
Yes.
given that the wheel has a radius, how would you get a flat bevel using the Tormek?
You're not. You're going to have to do that on a scary sharper on a stone.
Oh, forget it. Okay, thanks.
And then, you know, I don't do anything with a flat bevel.
Okay, good. Thank you.
The only, I try to get close to a flat bevel when I'm hand sharpening gouges,
Yeah.
carving gouges, but they're a pretty small blade anyway. You know, they're not a great big fat blade anyway. But even after that, I'll actually hand sharpen them, because with a carving gouge, you do want that kind of glossy edge all the way.
You want to show them using them?
Yes, we'll move over to the fine and then to the so yeah, I'm actually going to turn this around so that it's easier for you guys with the camera, and we'll go through this pretty quickly. I've got one little treat that I want to show you in a few minutes. A very special old plane. All right, so once we have done the coursework that we need to do, which obviously I didn't complete, but we won't worry about that. We now want to convert this to the finer cut. So we leave it set on the top here. I'm going to actually raise this a smidgen, so it's easier for me to hold the blade. I don't know what this thing's called. You don't want this riding on here, because it will grind off the roundness of this edge, and that will also contribute to not being able to have you, even if you've got good bushings there, it won't work. So basically what you're going to do is change the surface of this, and the way to do that is I'm going to change it to the fine. This is the coarse, so if I'm using fine most of the time and I need to go to coarse to 220, I use this, and here's how you do it. I'm rolling it to make sure that I get contact, and I'm running it back and forth just to be sure I get the whole of the surface. Again, there's a little pressure against me here, so I want to be sure my grip is firm. And I always check by running an edge there, and I can see whether the wheel is still fine. So once I've changed it to the fine setting, now I want to move over to the fine, the way to use the fine wheel, which is with the wheel going away from you now. So now you don't have a wheel that's cutting into the edge that you want to make sharp. You've got a wheel that's cutting away from the edge. So we take this.
Here's where you use the other set, Travis.
Got it. And I'm just curious. You've just changed the grit of the wheel by using that block. And I'm curious, how does the wheel itself change its grit character? Is it being imbued with stuff that comes off of the brick, or how is that happening?
I'll answer while Paul's setting up. What's happening is just like if you sand wood with 220, it feels very smooth.
Yeah.
You came back and smoothed it and sanded it again with 80 grit, it's going to feel rough.
Okay. So the wheel is
removing material. It's removing material from the stone, but it's removing it with a rougher surface or a finer surface.
Got it. And that just means that the wheel is deteriorating. How long does a wheel like that last?
Forever.
Okay.
You know, they have you measure it once, and I don't think mine's moved more than I don't use it all the time, but I bet it hasn't changed in diameter more than a millimeter or two.
Okay, great. Thank you. That was very helpful.
Right, so because of the nature of the beast here, I was just switching this baby over so that I could actually get the blade onto the thing. So I basically, the blade was sticking out this way and I turned it around. Okay, now is where it's really nice to have this. I'm going to turn it that way for you. Oh, you did. Okay, so I need to be about there. Sure, please. Now, before it worked quite well, but I'm going to have to make my blade longer. which is why one reason why we have this. So I'm going to push this through. I'm going to use this edge here for the trimming. Really sneak it in there. All right, let's try that now. Really close. Good enough for government work, I think. And of course, it's easy enough to figure out where this new one's grinding. And this is, you know, as you do this, this is where some of the, you know, you pay close personal attention to it. You don't just assume it's a key making machine.
So if you have prior markings, do you just strip the markings off with like acetone to get a clean steel to mark with your Sharpie?
If you have what?
He's asking how do you remove the markings that are left?
Oh, well, they'll either wear off or you can remove them with alcohol. Just a quick wipe with alcohol or acetone.
But it's,
I think that's good.
if it's not, if it didn't rub off, it's not going to be part of your cutting surface anyhow.
Right. Yeah, just better indication or fresher indication for the sharpening. Thanks.
All right. So, of course, I haven't ground this all the way, but because I've switched the blade around, now the fine cut is here. But if I had ground it's on the other side. So, if I'd ground the whole thing all the way, then this would be nice and even, and I'd be able to approach it from either side. So, I thought I had enough time in this presentation to.
We asked a lot of questions.
You know what? That's what it's all about. And I'd be happy to run to 2 hours, but I know we have a limit on our Zoom time, don't we? Put that music on, start swaying the hips. When I was learning in Jennifer's class, I had an old guy called, his name was Anderson as well, Lou Anderson. And as he showed me how to sharpen a blade properly, he came up with this little song. I won't try to imitate it because I've got no musical talent. But he sang this song in rhythm to his movements. Okay, so now you can see we're getting a somewhat finer edge to it, a somewhat finer cut there. And if I had cut this all the way, you know, because this is where it was cutting on this side, if I cut it all the way evenly, then I'd be doing the fine tuning on that. And then one last cut. Switch this baby over. Now this, when you're honing, this is where it is really critical to use this piece, because this is leather, it's not a stone wheel, and this is a sharp blade, so if your leather is coming towards you, it's going to tend to do that to you.
It's going away from me now, though, isn't it?
It's running away from me now, but I'm going to check it before I ever put a blade to it. Okay, so basically, to polish the back of your blade, this is what gets this machine from grinding to the right shape to actually giving you a usable sharp blade right out of the chute. So what you have to do is be very careful that you don't put that back bevel on there. So it's a very careful thing, but basically you just bring yourself up to that angle and put a nice polish on the back. I was just polishing that edge. And then, you can do the same thing here. And let's see just how sharp that is. Jen's criteria for an A was cuts human hair easily. Her criteria for a B was cuts human hair with a bit more difficulty. This guy I have never, apart from a little bit of polishing the back, It's shaving the hair off my arm just beautifully. So
You got an A on that, huh?
Yeah. So you can actually take it all the way without touching.
Wow, I always touch it up at the end.
Yeah.
I learned some things on how you're polishing.
Yeah. So this is pretty neat, because to me what it is, and I think this is something for the future, is it gives us something that we could do in a 2 to 3 hour class that would give the absolute novice woodworker the ability to get a blade literally razor sharp.
You know, that once we can do things in person again,
Yes.
there's enough of us that have Tormex that could bring them in.
Yeah. That would be I think a really neat class. And I think it would be very enabling for a lot of woodworkers to be able to
particularly since we have it. And I'll make sure we get some new bushings on that one.
Yeah. Yeah. And if there's anyone out there wants to donate an updated model, then we can.
That would even be nicer.
That would even be nicer. But it really is, a great adaptation of an ancient technique, and well thought out, and pretty well copied by a few different companies now. So this one claims to be designed in Germany. So, some Swede went to Germany, sat down with a drawing board.
Yeah, and then copied that one.
Yeah, and then copied that one, exactly. So
Could you briefly show the truing method on the wheel? The truing with the diamond thing for truing the wheel?
Do I have it with me? I didn't bring it in with me. If you guys want to wait for 30 seconds, I'll go get it.
Well, is it pretty much similar to changing the grit?
It is, but it's just a diamond one. And Paul, sometime you're in here, I'll do it with you.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Yeah, it's a piece of cake. You set it up. It basically looks similar to this. You set it up, and it has a wheel at one end, and it has a little diamond tip, and you just set it up to do a very light cut. You go back and forth, bringing the cut down each time until you have a perfectly flat surface. Doesn't take long. Does wear a little off the wheel, but I'm not sure how much these wheels are, but I think you can.
You go a long time on one.
Yeah, you can go an awful long time. We might eventually wear one out of the shop if enough people.
If we use it a lot, but I bet that hasn't changed more than a millimeter since we've had it.
I had a hard time getting it to run yesterday. That's so long it was stiff.
Because nobody knows how to use it.
Yeah, and that's a shame, actually. That's a shame.
Yeah, but perhaps, as I say, we can get people using it a bit more, because it is nice.
Paul, maybe one of these times when we can do in person again, we'll do a session for all the shift supervisors.
That would be really
good idea. Yeah.
Yes, that would be great. Yeah.
So we just bring in a bunch of them and have them so they can all have them all bring in a chisel or a plane iron.
That's right. Yeah, they get a free sharp instrument out of it.
Yeah.
That would be great.
I can't wait till we can do things in person again, but we have to.
Yeah, and that's going to happen one day. I think it's going to happen. So, okay, any other questions about the Tormek? I know we covered a lot of material in a short time, but feel free anytime to give me a yell about stuff like this.
I have just one basic question, and it comes from what you did. Is it true that the lower grit is always done with the bar on top and with the wheel coming towards you, and the lower grit is done with the bar on the side with the wheel going away from you?
No, you do both grits with it coming towards you.
Oh, do you?
Yeah, because otherwise it's pulling your hands up like this.
But didn't you just do it going away from you?
You did.
Did I? Oh, duh.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I shouldn't have. But obviously you can do it that way.
Okay, good, thank you.
But from the safety point of view, yes, yeah, I thought I did it up here. Oh well, no worries.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Okay,
Tormek says you can do it both ways, but I agree with Paul. You tend to chatter when it's going away from you.
Right.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
All righty. Okay, well, I got one. Do we have any more questions?
I don't think so.
Anyone? All right. I just want to show off something. One of the things I've taken to doing during this time of semi-confinement at home is just buying and selling bits and pieces on eBay. And I bought a set of 3 Lee Nielsen planes, which I sold 2 of them and they paid for 1 of them. So, and did a few other things. But I spotted something a few weeks ago, a restoration project that I just absolutely love. Oh my God. Oh, that's glue. I thought it was a tick. I thought it was a tick. I've got dogs. So when I talked about planes, we talked about the earliest planes being Roman, and I think I mentioned the fact that they had steel sides and steel bases and a wooden infill in there. Well, that way of making planes kind of died off for many, many years, and it was predominantly wooden bodied planes, solely wooden bodied planes that were used in down through the centuries. And then in about the 1850s, up in Scotland, near Clydesdale, there was an enormous shipbuilding industry up there. So a great deal of steel, a great deal of English and Swedish steel going into the boats, and so huge amounts of skills and resources along the lines of what produced this. And a gentleman called, I think his name was Stuart Spears, in the 1850s. He was a cabinet maker, and somebody sold him a ratty old plane that he kind of messed around with and sold at a handsome profit. So he started making planes. And the way they made these planes, excuse me while I get this out, was they had a steel body that was infilled, in this case with rosewood. This body is 3 steel plates. Wow. They are dovetailed together so smoothly that you can detect them. I can detect the edge of one dovetail there, and the edge of one there. But there are several dovetails along this, and a solid steel base and pins that run through holding the wood. And these have all been run through and then hammered down by hand. And so this is called an infill plane. Norris are the most famous manufacturer of them, but this is an infill smoothing plane, and it has, I've only heard about them until recently. They are famous for the quality of their cut, basically, and how fine a cut they can do. This is a smoothing plane. I've been, you've all heard me stand here and go, I hate sanding, for 3 reasons. It's noisy, it doesn't give that clean a result, it's very dusty, and it's expensive. So that's more than 3 reasons. Well, this one wasn't particularly cheap. It was but less than $200, and I did restore it. But what I've been in pursuit of for years is the ability to finish wood really nicely without having to ever touch it with sandpaper. And I've got, maybe I'll bring it in next time, but I'm just finishing a little coffee table that I use this to smooth it off on. You'll notice that the blade is really close to the front of the mouth, which is key to getting a really fine cut. And
the mouth is not adjustable, though, is it? The
mouth is not adjustable. If you want to adjust this plane, you have to change the thickness of the blade.
Ooh.
There's no adjustment to it, but it's purpose made for smoothing. And I've set this baby up. It is a bit of a, I'm used to setting up planes that don't have adjusters, and it's a bit of a nuisance. But what it does have is this, I'm not sure what you'd call it, the cap iron perhaps. As you tighten this up, it pushes the blade down a little bit. So you can go from ultra fine to fine and back again just by adjusting this little knob. And it really, I haven't quite tuned the blade perfectly, but it just gives you such a sweet cut. It's just like you're just polishing. Put a little wax on here, and it's my #1 smoother. That and a bevel up Lee Nielsen smoother. Mm-hmm. And it's just a beauty. They are very expensive normally. This was made in the 1920s, towards the end of Spears' time. The ones from the 1800s are worth a fortune. I mean, we're talking $2,000 and $3,000 and $4,000 for some. So I felt very happy. Somebody owned this He stamped
Oh,
his
hold
name
on, hold on.
5 times.
Hold on, my battery died.
Oh.
We see you fine, Dallas.
So yeah, the guy that owned this stamped his name 5 times on it, because I'm sure that they were, you know, it probably cost a couple of weeks' wages for a craftsman to buy something like this. But you know, as a plane dedicated to just smoothing, it's sweet, and to me worth every penny. And really does something about the mass and you know, the wood inside just gives you a really nice. It's not entirely chatter free. You still have to use skill, but it's nice.
Paul, your extra tool at the end of each session is really it's pretty special. I hope you continue to do that. That's pretty cool. You bring in something different, odd, mystery tool, something you particularly like, something you've restored. It's fun to hear you talk about those things.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, believe me, I've had a lot of fun with this thing already. Just restoring it. I had to go to Greg Weiss, who is the local plane guru, to get some tips on restoring it because the handle was cracked. But you know what? It blows me away to use something that's in the region of 100 years old, and it's still one of the finest. You know, these were the absolute peak of hand planes. They made jack planes and so on. This was just the finest planes that were ever made, and everything since has been downhill, really. And these, of course, he was making these around the same time a dude in America called Bailey was coming up with these newfangled cast iron planes. All right, I'm out of talking. Any further questions? Anyone got any suggestions for future subjects? Something you would really, maybe you know nothing about? Because I keep coming up with these ideas, but
Paul, I know so little that I can't even come up with ideas.
I'm sorry?
I know so little that I can't even come up with ideas for suggestions.
Well, in the what's that old expression? In the world of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. So. All right. Well, we'll. I'm not quite sure what we'll do next time, but we will. And there's an endless set of topics in hand tools. So,
hey, Paul, real quick question. So
yes.
maybe future topic. I don't know if you have a Scorp or an ADS,
Oh, there you
but
go.
those are unique chair making tools. Maybe you could show us how to use those or how to sharpen them.
If I had them, I would.
If you have access to them.
I could probably figure out how to use them and how to definitely how to sharpen them. That's no question. It's a
Okay.
single edge blade, but I don't actually. I've been looking. There's an awesome array of ADSs and Scorps and so on out there, and I have yet to figure out which ones I would want for what, or even what I would want to be doing with them. You know, I do have a Travisher and I do have a draw knife, but I think I've already shown those off. But
Maybe we could borrow them from the cabinet making shop we use at the fair. Maybe we could borrow a couple of those tools just to demonstrate those and how to sharpen them.
okay, yeah, and I'll take them home and play with them and see. What they call the ADS is the old shin cracker.
Right.
Because the way they used to be used was like this, and if you messed up, you messed up your shins.
Awesome. Thank
I'd love
you.
to see you showing us how to make planes. I've been trying to make a plane for myself, and this is the roughest plane you'll ever see, which is a bit of a comparison to this one, which is the most complicated, beautiful plane. It's got metal things in the middle here, and the adjustments are fantastic.
Oh, I'm looking at a postage stamp size picture, but that looks like an old plow plane.
Yeah.
Looks like a nice one as well. Hang on.
Hold on a second here, Chris. Now hold it up.
Yeah, it's an old plow plane.
Oh, yes, sweet. Lots of adjustments. Yeah, that's a nice one. Yeah. Yeah, I'm just starting to get into the world of wooden planes. That's one of the, I bought some beading planes, and they're fiddly. There's definitely a whole world of skills there. Where's he going?
Let's wrap it.
All right. Okay. So without further ado, if there are no more questions, we're going to wrap it up. And I will see you guys in 2 weeks' time.
Thanks, Paul, for your time. It's a great session.
Definitely.
Well, thanks for checking in. And you know, as I say, when we open up, I think we've got some great, interesting workshops to do.
Definitely. Thank you.
Exactly.
everyone.
Thank you.